Radical Islamic terrorism has targeted our nation, as you know, but this past week, senior national security officials were warning that may no longer be the biggest threat facing our country. At the annual assessment of worldwide threats to the U.S. at the Senate Intelligence Committee hearing this past week, CIA Director Mike Pompeo, FBI Director Christopher Wray, and National Security Agency Admiral Mike Rogers, the director of that agency, all testified that the greatest challenge we now face comes not from jihadists, but the halls of Moscow and Beijing, that Russia and China now rank at the top of the list as principal threats to our national security. Joining us now is Judy Miller, who's written about this. She is an adjunct fellow at the Manhattan Institute for Policy Research, a Pulitzer Prize-winning author and journalist and Fox News contributor. Judy, so what happened to the radical Islamic terrorists who hate us?
Well, I think they are still there, Eric. But what was really striking about that testimony is that as someone who has covered terrorism for the past 30 years, the top national security advisors and intelligence officials in this government no longer even spent much time talking about the Islamic threat. Now, does that mean that ISIS is gone? No, it doesn't. And I know that, you know that, we know that here at Fox News. But the fact of the matter is the numbers of fatalities and attacks have declined, along with the actual retaking of territory in Syria and Iraq. Between, depending on whose numbers you're looking at, 85% and 90% of the territory that ISIS used to control is now back in government or non-ISIS hands. But here's the problem. These guys haven't gone away, and they're still capable of doing enormous damage. Look at what happened. Last year, there were 22,487 attacks in which 18,475 people died. That's worldwide. Now, that's down, but it's still a significant threat. And I think that our nation's national security and intelligence people should have devoted a little more time to that ongoing continuous threat. We have in every FBI district in this country, there is an open investigation in all 50 states. So let's not get complacent.
Well, we're still busting these type of cases. There was one in New York City, the two accused brothers accused of bomb making. This just happened this past week. But what's so striking about what you are saying is that, in a way, we're back to what we grew up with, facing the other superpowers, being aggressive against our democracy, notwithstanding those horrendous figures you just mentioned. It's back to Russia and China.
Right. It's the Cold War all over again, only in a new version. You know, I think we journalists are often accused of having a short attention span, but I think the same kind of shortcoming is also true of our intelligence community. I've covered them a long time, and I worry about sustaining the kind of attention that has resulted in this dramatic drop in attacks by ISIS. You know, in Britain, there are 30,000 people being watched who are suspected of still having ties to the Islamic State. Here you have the ongoing investigations. I worry that we will shift our focus so dramatically to Russia, to the growing Chinese threat, that we will lose focus on the people who still every day want to either do us in or inspire others to do so.
Well, you wrote in your article in City Journal, let me read a quote from that. You say that Russian efforts to affect the outcome of the 2018 midterm elections and other influence operations against the U.S. were ongoing. Concern about the implications of a failing but aggressive Russia and a rising China now overshadow the challenges that has driven American national security since the terrorist attacks of 9/11. We just saw with the Mueller indictment this past week, the threat directly from Moscow to undermine the very sacred democracy that we hold, you know, so dear in this country. So what should the president do? He's not going with the sanctions in Congress. He hasn't harshly criticized Moscow or Vladimir Putin, although he has said Russia is a bad actor. Are you satisfied with American response so far?
I don't think anyone who really watches what's happened and has looked at the president's response to the Russian meddling and interference is happy with the president's response so far. I mean, look, even though he can claim tremendous credit for ISIS, for defeating that threat, this other threat has been on the table, has been staring at us since he was running for office.
Well, it was since the Obama administration.
Absolutely.
They incorporated this Internet agency in 2013.
Yes.
And the President Obama, that administration, basically didn't alert us until, what, October?
Until
publicly,
October.
and then he took action after the election. But finally, what do you think the president should do?
I think we need sanctions, the sanctions that Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, has been promising. We need sanctions that will get Vladimir Putin's attention, because if he thinks that he can continue to do this, and by the way, the national security and intelligence community said the Russians are continuing these activities and will do so straight up until the 2018 midterms, unless Vladimir Putin knows that this is a red line and he better not cross it, he's going to continue doing what he's doing. He hasn't heard that from President Trump. He needs to.
Judy Miller, that sanction bill, it's on the president's desk, so we'll see what happens. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Very sobering analysis of the
Thank you,
threats
Eric.
that we face, of course.